Maya Brooks had never been the type of person to stay in one place for too long. Her job in the Special Forces often took her to different countries, different cities, and different kinds of dangerous situations. She had learned how to move quickly, how to adapt, and how to stay calm no matter what was happening around her. But now, for the first time in many years, she was settling down in one place for a while. She had bought a house in a peaceful neighborhood on the edge of Atlanta. It was not a big or fancy house, but it was hers. After years of living out of a suitcase, she wanted a home. The day Maya moved in was bright and clear. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and the street was quiet. It was exactly the kind of calm she had been missing in her life. Boxes stacked high in the back of her old pickup truck. She started carrying them inside one by one. Each box was filled with things from her past missions: books, pictures, gear, and some personal things she had kept safe through the years. Maya was not a tall woman, but she carried herself with the confidence and strength of someone who had seen the world and survived its dangers. Her dark skin shone warmly in the sunlight, and her eyes scanned the neighborhood carefully as she walked up to her new front door. To a casual observer, she looked like any other new resident, eager to start fresh, but inside, she was alert and thoughtful, always watching, always ready. Neighbors were starting to come outside, curious about the new person in the street. Some smiled politely, others just nodded. Maya returned the gestures, trying to be friendly, but not drawing too much attention. She had learned that sometimes it was better to blend in, especially in a place where people didn't know her story. Inside the house, Maya took a deep breath. This place was quiet. It smelled of fresh paint and new wood, but also something else: the promise of a new chapter. She opened one box, pulling out a worn photograph. It was a picture of her and her team from years ago, standing on a dusty airfield halfway around the world. She smiled softly but didn't let herself get lost in memories. There was work to be done. She spent the morning unpacking slowly. The boxes were heavy and her muscles ached, but it was a good kind of tired, the kind that comes from honest effort. Outside, the neighborhood seemed peaceful, but Maya's instincts told her to keep watching. The world had a way of changing quickly, and she had learned never to let her guard down. As she carried another box inside, she noticed movement out of the corner of her eye. Two men were walking down the street toward her house. They wore uniforms. That looked official. Dark pants, light shirts, badges that said HOA enforcement. Maya had heard of HOA officers before. They were the people who made sure neighborhoods followed rules about things like lawns, trash, and noise. Usually they were harmless, but something about these men felt off. They moved with a confidence that didn't seem natural, like they wanted to make sure everyone knew they were in charge. Maya stopped what she was doing and watched carefully. The men stopped in front of her house. One of them spoke first, his voice low and serious. "Are you the new resident here?" he asked. Maya nodded slowly. "Yes, I just moved in today." "We've been checking the neighborhood," the man said. "There are some rules about parking and property that everyone has to follow. We need to see some ID." Maya raised an eyebrow. "I don't understand. I just got here." "What kind of ID do you want?" The man's eyes narrowed. "Just some proof you live here. We have to make sure everyone is following the HOA rules." Maya was calm but firm. "I don't have any HOA ID with me. I have my driver's license, and I can provide that." The man grunted and reached for something on his belt. Maya's heart rate quickened, but she didn't panic. Years of training taught her to stay calm and think clearly. The man pulled out a taser and pointed it at her. "Don't move," he said sharply. Maya froze for a moment, but her mind raced. Something was wrong. These men weren't real officers. Real HOA officers didn't carry weapons like tasers. This was something else. At that moment, Maya slipped her hand into her pocket and pressed a small button on her smartwatch. It sent a silent alert to her team. the people she trusted more than anyone else in the world. They were nearby, ready to help if she needed them. The two men stared at her, not realizing what they were facing. Maya's calmness hid her strength. She was ready for whatever came next. As the men prepared to make their next move, Maya's neighbors watched from behind, curtains and windows, unsure of what was happening. The quiet neighborhood was about to change forever. Maya had barely started to settle into her new home when the quiet calm of the neighborhood began to change. The peaceful sounds of birds and distant lawnmowers were suddenly interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. She looked up from the box she was unpacking and saw two men walking down the street toward her house. They were dressed in uniforms that looked official, but somehow felt wrong. They wore dark pants and light-colored shirts, with patches sewn onto their sleeves that read HOA Enforcement. Their boots were heavy, and they walked with a confident, almost aggressive stride. Maya's eyes narrowed as she watched them get closer. She had heard of HOA officers before. They were supposed to be people who helped keep neighborhoods clean and safe, enforcing rules about how homes and yards should look. Usually, they were polite and professional, but these men did not look like the kind of officers she wanted to meet. As they reached her front yard, the taller of the two men stepped forward. He had a serious look on his face, his jaw tight and eyes sharp. "Are you the new resident here?" he asked, his voice low and a little threatening. Maya nodded slowly, trying to keep her voice calm. "Yes, I just moved in today." The man's eyes scanned her quickly, like he was looking for something to use against her. "We've been checking the neighborhood," he said. "There are rules about parking, property maintenance, and noise. Everyone has to follow the HOA guidelines. We need to see some ID from you to make sure you're following the rules." Maya's brow furrowed in confusion. "I don't understand. I've only been here a few hours. What kind of ID are you asking for?" The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at his partner who was standing slightly behind him, watching carefully. Then he spoke again, his tone growing colder. "Just some proof you live here. We have to make sure you aren't breaking any HOA codes. You need to cooperate." Maya took a small step back into her porch, keeping her hands visible but ready. She wasn't about to let two strangers push her around, especially when they weren't showing any real identification. "I don't have any HOA ID with me," she said evenly. "I have my driver's license, and I can show that." The man frowned and reached for his belt. Maya's heart began to beat faster, but she stayed calm. Her years in the Special Forces had taught her how to control fear and think clearly under pressure. When the man pulled out a taser and pointed it at her, Maya's eyes locked on the weapon. "Don't move," he said sharply. Maya knew this wasn't right. Real HOA officers did not carry tasers. This was not a simple neighborhood complaint. Something dangerous was happening. The man's confidence was too strong, and his uniform looked too cheap. She realized that these men were not who they claimed to be. Her mind raced as she looked around. The street was quiet, but she noticed a few neighbors peeking out of their windows, curious but hesitant. Maya's training kicked in. She had to stay calm and find a way out without getting hurt. She reached into her pocket and pressed a small button on her smartwatch. It sent a silent alert to her team, a signal that she needed backup. The team had trained with her for years and was ready to respond quickly if she got into trouble. The two men didn't notice the alert, and they kept focusing on her. The one with the taser stepped closer. "Show me your ID now," he demanded. Maya took a deep breath. She had to think fast. "I'm happy to show you my license," she said slowly, "but I want to see your identification first." "Who are you really?" The man's face hardened. "We're HOA officers. We don't need to show you anything." Maya shook her head, refusing to be intimidated. "That's not true. Real officers carry proper badges and IDs. You're not real." The other man stepped forward then, his expression dark. "You don't want to make this harder than it needs to be." Maya could see the anger rising in their eyes. She knew this was a dangerous situation. They were trying to scare her into submission, but she was not afraid. The taser was still pointed at her, and she noticed how the man's finger was ready on the trigger. Suddenly, a noise came from down the street. A car pulled up, and two SUVs stopped near the curb. Men stepped out, dressed casually but alert. They moved with purpose and confidence. Maya recognized them immediately. Her team was here. The fake HOA officers looked around, confused. They hadn't expected anyone else. The neighborhood that had seemed so quiet just minutes ago was suddenly full of danger and action. Maya didn't move. She kept her eyes on the men in front of her, but inside, she was ready. Her team was close, and together they could handle this. The taser man hesitated, realizing maybe he had underestimated her. The tension grew thick in the air. Maya's neighbors watched silently, holding their breath as the scene unfolded. They could see that these men were not ordinary HOA officers, and that Maya was no ordinary woman. Her team closed in quickly but quietly, surrounding the imposters without making a sound. The fake officers were trapped. The taser was lowered, and the men looked around nervously. Maya's voice was calm but firm. "You're under arrest," she said quietly. The men realized they had lost. They dropped their weapons and raised their hands. The danger was over. As the situation calmed down, real police arrived. Maya's team handed over the imposters to the authorities. The men were scam artists, pretending to be HOA officers to intimidate and rob homeowners. They were dangerous and had targeted other neighborhoods before. Maya watched as the men were taken away. She felt a mix of relief and sadness. The peaceful neighborhood she had hoped for was not as safe as she thought. But she also knew that she and her team had stopped something bad from happening. Later, Maya spoke with neighbors who came out to thank her and ask questions. She explained the importance of staying alert and knowing who to trust. The neighborhood began to change, from a place of fear to a place of strength. Maya looked around at her new home, feeling more connected than ever. She was ready to protect this community, not just as a resident but as someone who had faced danger and won. The moment was tense, heavy and thick with unspoken danger. Maya could feel her heartbeat steadying, even as the two men in fake HOA uniforms aimed their taser-like weapon at her. The taser, crackling with electricity, was not something a true HOA enforcement officer carried. She knew that immediately. They were imposters, and they did not realize the power of the woman standing in front of them. Maya's eyes flicked to her smartwatch as her fingers slid to press the small, hidden button that sent a silent alarm. It was a lifeline, a signal that only her trusted team knew about. A team of specially trained operatives who could respond in moments. She had called for backup without the men realizing it. The two men, focused on intimidating her, didn't see the SUVs parked just a short distance away. They had no idea that Maya's backup was already moving toward the scene with purpose and speed. Maya stood her ground calmly. Years of military training had taught her that fear could paralyze people, but calmness could give strength. She didn't flinch, even as the taser's red light blinked menacingly. She knew that once her team arrived, the situation would change rapidly. As the imposters barked orders and demanded her ID again, Maya stayed quiet, waiting for the right moment. Her eyes scanned the neighborhood. Some neighbors were peeking out of their windows, and others were frozen on their porches, unsure whether to step in or stay back. Maya understood their fear. She wished she could protect them all. Suddenly, the sound of engines rolling onto the street broke the tense silence. Two black SUVs turned the corner slowly but steadily, their tires crunching softly on the gravel road. From each vehicle, armed men dressed as construction workers and delivery drivers began to exit. Their faces were serious, their movements precise, and their eyes sharp. These were Maya's team, veterans, operatives trained for situations just like this. The fake HOA men glanced nervously toward the new arrivals, but it was too late for them. The operatives spread out quickly, blocking all possible escape routes. Maya's team had her back, without a single word, the scene shifted. The two men who had tried to intimidate Maya were suddenly surrounded. Their confident postures faded as they realized they were trapped. One of the impostors reached for his taser again, but a sharp whistle from one of Maya's teammates stopped him instantly. The men raised their hands slowly, fear now clear in their eyes. The taser was lowered, and Maya's team approached quietly, moving in to take control without violence. Years of training had taught them how to handle dangerous situations calmly and professionally. Maya finally relaxed her shoulders. The danger was still real, but now it was manageable. As the team secured the imposters, Maya's mind raced. Who were these men? How had they come to pose as HOA officers, and what was their real goal? She listened as one of her team members informed the local police officers who had just arrived that the men were suspected criminals, wanted for a string of scams in nearby neighborhoods. The police quickly took over. They asked Maya to explain everything, her quick thinking, the silent alert, the arrival of the team. Maya recounted the details clearly and without hesitation, making sure the officers understood the seriousness of the situation. Her neighbors, watching from safe distances, began to come out into the street. They murmured in disbelief and relief. Some thanked Maya quietly, some nodded in respect. The woman who had seemed just like anyone else had saved the neighborhood from a dangerous threat. Maya looked around at her new community. She realized that this moment was more than just about catching criminals. It was about standing up for safety, trust, and dignity. It was about showing that strength and courage could come in unexpected forms. As the police led the imposters away, Maya's team gathered around her briefly, nodding with approval. The operation had gone smoothly, but they all knew that danger could return any time. Maya felt a new responsibility settle on her shoulders, not just as a resident, but as a protector. Later that day, as Maya sat on her porch, she thought about the quiet neighborhood she had hoped for and the reality she had found. She knew that her life was never going to be simple, but she was ready for it. After all, she had trained for moments like this. And now she was exactly where she was meant to be. Certainly. Here is an expanded, simple, and interesting explanation of Part 4, the resolution where the imposters are unmasked and arrested, aiming to reach about 2,500 words. The moment the two men realized they were surrounded, the tension in the air shifted dramatically. What had started as a quiet afternoon in a peaceful neighborhood turned into a high-stakes confrontation. The fake HOA officers, men who thought they had power simply because they wore cheap uniforms and carried weapons, now understood they were caught. But this wasn't just a game anymore. It was real, and it was over for them. Maya stood tall, calm, and steady, her eyes locked on the men who had tried to threaten her. Her team moved silently and confidently around the imposters, blocking any chance of escape. Years of training had prepared them for moments like this, where speed, precision, and control were everything. One of the imposters tried to make a sudden move for his taser, but before he could reach it, a member of Maya's team was already there, grabbing his arm and twisting it behind his back. The man grunted in pain but didn't resist further. The second imposter lowered his hands slowly, realizing the fight was lost. The fake officers were quickly handcuffed with plastic zip ties, tools used for quick and secure restraint. They were told calmly but firmly that they were under arrest for impersonating law enforcement officers and for other crimes related to their scam. The local police, who had arrived just minutes earlier, took control of the scene. They checked the men's IDs, which were fake, and ran their names through the system. The results confirmed what Maya and her team suspected. These men were wanted criminals who had been operating across several neighborhoods, pretending to be HOA enforcers. Their goal was to intimidate homeowners, especially those who might not question authority, and scam them out of money or property. The officers thanked Maya and her team for their quick action and cooperation. They explained that these kinds of scams were more common than people realized, but rarely were they stopped so effectively. As the suspects were led to police cars, neighbors started to come out from their homes, some with phones in hand, recording, and whispering to one another. The quiet street had turned into a small scene of relief and curiosity. Maya noticed a few neighbors approach her cautiously. They wanted to know more about what had happened, how she had known these men were fake, and what they should do if they ever faced something similar. Maya spoke simply but clearly. She told them to always ask for proper identification when anyone claiming to be an officer came to their door. Real officers carry badges and official paperwork. If someone seemed suspicious, it was okay to be cautious and to call the police. She shared some of the training she had received, explaining that staying calm and thinking clearly could save lives. The neighborhood had been lucky today, she said, but being prepared and aware was important for everyone. The neighbors listened intently, their fears slowly turning into understanding and hope. They thanked Maya again, some even inviting her to community meetings to share safety tips. Maya smiled but told them she was just glad no one was hurt. Later that evening, Maya sat on her porch, reflecting on the day's events. What had started as a simple day of moving into a new home had turned into a lesson about trust, strength, and community. She thought about the imposters, men who had used fear and lies to control others. They had underestimated her and the people around her. They hadn't known that behind Maya's calm exterior was a lifetime of training and courage. They hadn't expected her team to be ready and waiting. Maya felt a deep sense of pride, but also responsibility. She had come to this neighborhood seeking peace, but now she realized she had a role to play in protecting it. The quiet street, once just a place to live, had become a community where people looked out for each other. Maya hoped that the story of what had happened today would remind everyone that safety was a shared effort. The imposters were gone, taken away by the police, but their threat had left a mark. Maya knew that vigilance would always be needed, but she also knew that with courage, preparation, and support, any challenge could be met. As the sun set over the rooftops, Maya felt ready for whatever came next. She was no longer just a new resident. She was a guardian of her community. After the imposters were arrested and taken away by the police, the neighborhood slowly began to breathe again. What had started as a terrifying moment turned into a turning point, a moment that changed everything. The quiet streets, once filled with suspicion and fear, were now alive with a new sense of hope and togetherness. Maya stood outside her house, watching her neighbors come out of their homes one by one. Faces that had once shown worry and distrust now carried smiles and nods of appreciation. People started talking openly, sharing their feelings and stories, finally feeling safe enough to connect with one another. It was a new beginning. For Maya, this was more than just a relief. It was a sign that her decision to settle here had been right. She had hoped for peace when she moved into the neighborhood, but what she found was a community in need of healing and protection, and she was ready to help. The next day, Maya reached out to the neighborhood association and offered to lead a safety meeting. Many residents eagerly accepted her invitation. They wanted to learn how to protect themselves, how to spot scams, and how to work together to keep their community safe. Maya prepared carefully. She wanted the meeting to be simple and clear, so everyone could understand, no matter their background or experience. She talked about the events with the fake HOA men, explaining how easily people could be tricked by someone pretending to have authority. She emphasized the importance of asking for proper identification, calling the real police if something felt wrong, and never giving in to threats or intimidation. But Maya didn't stop there. She taught her neighbors some basic safety tips: how to watch for suspicious behavior, how to secure their homes, and how to communicate with one another. She encouraged them to look out for each other and to never hesitate to ask for help. The meeting was a success. The neighborhood, once quiet and disconnected, started to come alive. People formed small groups to share information. They organized neighborhood watch programs, and they began to look at their streets not just as a place to live, but as a place to protect. Maya's leadership didn't go unnoticed. The local police reached out to her, thanking her for her quick thinking and bravery. They invited her to join community safety boards and offered support for the programs she wanted to start. Maya felt proud but remained humble. She knew that this was just the beginning of a long journey to rebuild trust and safety. Meanwhile, the imposter's arrest made the news. Stories about the fake HOA men spread across local media, warning others about the dangers of scams and fake authority figures. Maya's role in stopping the criminals was praised, though she often brushed off the attention, saying she was just doing what anyone should do. Despite the media buzz, Maya focused on her neighbors and her home. She spent her days helping organize safety patrols and educating residents. She built friendships with families, sharing meals and stories on warm evenings. Slowly, the neighborhood transformed from a place of fear into a community of strength. One evening, as Maya walked down the street, she noticed children playing freely outside, their laughter echoing in the air. She smiled, knowing that the hard work was paying off. The fear that had once gripped the community was fading, replaced by trust and hope. Maya also took time to care for herself. She went jogging in the early mornings, enjoying the peace of the quiet streets before the day began. She kept in touch with her team, who supported her from afar, but knew that she had found a new mission here. Her new home was no longer just a house. It was a symbol of resilience. Every unpacked box, every repaired fence, and every smile shared between neighbors was a step toward a better future. Maya understood that life was unpredictable. Threats might come again, and challenges would never fully disappear. But with courage, preparation, and community, she knew they could face whatever came next. The neighborhood had changed, and so had Maya. She had come to find peace, but had found purpose. She had arrived as a stranger, but was now a protector, a leader, and a friend. And as the sun set each evening, painting the sky with warm colors, Maya felt a deep sense of belonging. Here, in this once quiet neighborhood, she had found not only a home, but a family.